Deadly typhoons and floods ravage the country. We ask, how can we better prepare for these natural disasters? Now, we discuss these environmental phenomena, the forces behind them, and the role played by climate change with multi-awarded environmental scientist Janice Lao-Noche. Janice joins us tonight on The Final Word. Good evening from Manila and good morning from where you are in the U.S. Thank you for this opportunity. Janice, let me just start by asking, as many communities here in the Philippines grieve over the loss of life and properties, many are asking, why is extreme weather happening in this part of the globe, given the fact that there are also events like the recent tornado outbreak there in the U.S. and the massive flooding elsewhere?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, David. Kasi ang climate change is such a global phenomenon. And particularly in the Philippines, the thing about typhoons, as the heat content rises, tumataas yung temperature around the world, particularly the way the ocean absorbs heat and the way it absorbs CO2. It's like gasoline being thrown to a typhoon. The typhoon really, really loves heat. And the more heat there is, the more na nagiging stronger yung typhoon. And so that's why we're seeing, increasing typhoons. A lot of us have experienced different types of typhoons and the impacts, whether it was Ondoy, Yolanda, and now Odette. Unfortunately, the most impacted countries are the ones that are in the equator. And that is obviously one of them will be the Philippines. And a lot of what we're seeing now are what we scientists call baked-in impacts. We're going to be seeing this for the next few decades. Unless we really do something to change the way we live, this is going to be our new normal.
Janice, climate change is such a complex topic, no? Especially here in the Philippines, in the setting here in the Philippines. How can we make ordinary folks care and, more importantly, understand so that they can better prepare and mitigate the impact of this extreme weather?
Yeah, and I think what's really challenging in the Philippines is a lot of our people are still living in poverty. So it's very, very hard for us to tell them, prepare for the future, maghanda ka, you already know what's going to happen, especially when they live day-to-day kind of life. And so I think what we need to do is for those people who can make long-term decisions, and there's a lot pa rin, even the government can make some sort of long-term planning. We really need to think holistically about adapting to climate change. And it can't just be one silver bullet. A lot of people have asked me this question. Ano po yung pinaka magagawa natin? And there's not just one thing we can do. There are a lot of things we have to do, things like implementing our building codes properly, making sure that we don't build on floodplains para avoid houses are going to be impacted by flooding, have preparations in terms of stocking on canned goods, enough water. Kasi alam na natin we already know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of kailan siya mangyayari. We already know that most of the typhoons that will hit the Philippines will even be more severe than maybe 20 years ago. So that knowledge, hopefully we can plan around that. And it's really, really about holistic adaptation.
Janice, experts like you, we know, are working to understand what are fueling this extreme weather. But are we also seeing a change in terms of the pattern or direction of what we often call the typhoon belt? No? Meaning, are the paths of powerful storms shifting, that they can now hit or impact places or areas not known to be frequented by typhoons? Kasi we often hear this from residents, from local officials, na sinasabi nila, dati naman, hindi naman kami natatamaan ng bagyo eh.
Yeah, as I said, again, it's really because tumataas yung temperature around the world. And because the Philippines just happens to be sort of in a double whammy, if you think about it. We're in the equator, which gets hotter than most places around the world. Plus, we're surrounded by ocean. And as I said earlier, diba, gasolina yung heat to a typhoon, they love it and it makes them stronger. So in this situation, as a typhoon moves along the oceans, it gains more strength as it gets through that heat. You know, I grew up in Cebu and it's really my mom is from Leyte and it breaks my heart to see what's going on. I was so surprised because when I was growing up in Cebu, this wasn't a thing I grew up with. And but when I look back at the fact na at the things I've studied in the past 20 years, it's really not a surprise kasi ito talaga yung nakita namin eh. This is what the models have been telling us. It's just now the models show numbers to us as environmental scientists and climate scientists. But now we actually see the numbers in real life, kung ano talaga impact niya on the ground.
Janice, let's talk about your book. No? You wrote a book with your daughters, Sparky and Benny, and the Big Home Mystery. That book basically introduces the complex concept of climate change to our kids. Why do you think this is important?
Because, you know, you mentioned it earlier, David. It's so hard for me to explain climate change. I was even telling my friends, like, do you have a day? Ganun siya ka-complicated. And I realized you don't really need this to understand the technical science, but I wanted people to understand what was at stake. And I wrote it with my daughter because I'm concerned about her future. And I'm concerned, ano ba yung ibibigay natin dun sa next generation? And I wanted it to feel emotional for a lot of people because iba yung, it's easy to win people with the mind. I can just give you all the data. The science is clear. Mas mahirap intindihin what is in it for me? Why do I need to care about this? And that's why I wrote the book, firstly, to make climate change a little easier for people to understand if they're not scientists. Enough science para magets nila kung ano siya. But in the second place, also give them a glimmer of hope. We still have time, and the book doesn't have an ending, so to speak, because I wanted people to realize na we get to write the ending. Tayo, it's in our hands to make that choice and make that difference.
Maraming salamat. Thank you for your insights, environmental scientist and development economist Janice Lao-Noche.